I'm recording this 6 months after leaving neurology, partly as documentation, partly as confession. My colleagues at Pacific Medical Research Institute believe I suffered a breakdown. Hospital administration cited research irregularities in my departure. Both explanations are preferable to the truth. I specialized in memory disorders for 15 years: Alzheimer's, Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal degeneration. I'd mapped the deterioration of human consciousness across thousands of patients. Memory, I believed, was simply electrochemical patterns in neural networks. Consciousness was biological computation. The mind was the brain, nothing more. Patient memoriam changed that certainty. The referral came from Dr. Marcus Webb in internal medicine. Unusual presentation, his note read. 72-year-old female with complete retrograde amnesia following minor head trauma. No anterograde impairment. Neuroimaging inconclusive. Requesting specialized evaluation. I saw hundreds of amnesia cases. Most followed predictable patterns: the hippocampal damage, the gradient of memory loss, the characteristic imaging findings. But when Eleanor Morrison walked into my office that Tuesday morning, I knew immediately this case would be different. She appeared younger than her stated age, with silver hair and remarkably clear green eyes. Her movements were precise, deliberate. She introduced herself politely, but with obvious frustration. Dr. Chen, I understand you specialize in memory disorders. I need you to help me understand what's happened to my mind. I reviewed Dr. Webb's initial workup. 3 weeks prior, Mrs. Morrison had slipped on ice outside her Portland home, striking her head on concrete. She'd been unconscious for approximately 10 minutes. When she awoke, she remembered nothing of her life prior to the accident. Mrs. Morrison, I'd like to start with some basic questions. Do you remember your childhood, your education, marriage? Nothing. I know my name because people tell me it's my name. I know this is my house because they say I live there. But I have no memory of any life before waking up in that hospital bed. Standard amnesia evaluation typically reveals patchy memory loss with islands of preserved recollection. Complete retrograde amnesia with preserved anterograde function is extraordinarily rare, usually indicating psychiatric conversion rather than organic brain injury. What about skills? Can you drive, cook, use a computer? That's what's strange. I retain all procedural knowledge. I can play piano. Apparently I've played for 60 years, though I don't remember learning. I speak fluent French, though I can't recall studying it. I know how to perform complex mathematical calculations, but I don't remember my career as an accountant. I administered the Wechsler memory scale and found something unprecedented. Her immediate and delayed recall were perfect. She could memorize and reproduce complex information flawlessly. But when asked about any personal memory predating her accident, her mind was completely blank. Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to show you some photographs your daughter provided. Tell me if anything seems familiar. I displayed images spanning decades: her wedding, children's births, family vacations, graduations. She studied each photograph with intense concentration, as if trying to force recognition through sheer will. I can see that this woman in the photographs resembles me. The progression of aging is consistent, but I feel no connection to these images. It's like examining a stranger's photo album. The MRI findings were impossible. Her brain showed no evidence of trauma, no contusions, no hemorrhage, no edema. The hippocampus, critical for memory formation, was structurally normal. More puzzling, her brain exhibited characteristics inconsistent with her age. Dr. Rachel Torres, our head of neuroradiology, called me personally about the scans. Sarah, I've reviewed these images 3 times. This woman's brain shows virtually no age-related changes. The white matter is pristine. Gray matter volume is consistent with someone 40 years younger. Either this isn't a 72-year-old brain, or we're looking at the most remarkable preservation I've ever encountered. I ordered additional imaging, PET scans to assess metabolic activity, DTI to examine white matter integrity, functional MRI to map neural networks. Every study revealed the same impossible finding: a brain that appeared decades younger than its chronological age. Standard neuropsychological testing failed to explain Mrs. Morrison's condition. I designed specialized experiments to probe the nature of her amnesia. First, I tested implicit memory using word stem completion tasks. Patients with retrograde amnesia typically retain unconscious memories even when explicit recall is lost. Mrs. Morrison showed no implicit memory for personal experiences. Then I tried recognition paradigms. I presented thousands of items, photographs of locations she'd visited, music from her era, products from her past. Normal amnesia patients show increased galvanic skin response or pupil dilation when exposed to personally relevant stimuli, even without conscious recognition. Mrs. Morrison showed no physiological response to any personal memory cue. "Dr. Chen," she said during one testing session, "I feel like I'm looking at artifacts from someone else's life. These photographs, these objects, they're historically interesting, but they have no personal meaning." My research laboratory had recently acquired a high-density EEG system capable of recording from 256 electrode sites simultaneously. I convinced Mrs. Morrison to participate in neural recording sessions while viewing personal photographs. Normal subjects show characteristic patterns when viewing personally meaningful images: increased activity in the posterior cingulate cortex, medial prefrontal regions, and temporal lobe memory networks. These default mode network activations represent the neural signature of autobiographical memory retrieval. Mrs. Morrison's recordings were unlike anything in the literature. When viewing personal photographs, her brain showed no default mode network activation. Instead, I observed patterns I'd never seen before, perfectly synchronized oscillations across all recording sites, as if her entire brain was operating in harmony. Dr. James Martinez, our neurophysiology specialist, spent hours analyzing the data. "Sarah, these recordings are technically impossible. Human brains don't generate global synchronization like this. It would require neural connectivity that doesn't exist in normal anatomy." I contacted Mrs. Morrison's family, friends, and former colleagues, trying to reconstruct her life history. What I discovered was disturbing. Her daughter, Jennifer, provided detailed accounts of their relationship, but when I checked documentary evidence, inconsistencies emerged. Photographs supposedly showing Mrs. Morrison at recent family events contained temporal anomalies, clothing styles that didn't match the stated dates, backgrounds that seemed digitally manipulated. Her employment records at Morrison and Associates Accounting showed gaps and irregularities. Former colleagues remembered her, but their descriptions were vague, generic. Several mentioned feeling like they'd known her for years but couldn't recall specific interactions. Most unsettling was her medical history. Dr. Webb's files indicated she'd been his patient for 2 decades, but when I examined her medical records, they were surprisingly sparse. Routine checkups, but no significant illnesses, no hospitalizations, no age-related health issues typical for someone in their 70s. "Mrs. Morrison," I asked during our 4th session, "do you have any theories about what might have happened to you?" She was quiet for a long moment, studying her hands. "Dr. Chen, what if the person everyone thinks I am never existed? What if Eleanor Morrison is a construct, a false identity created around a consciousness that doesn't belong in this life?" I reached out to colleagues across the country, seeking similar cases. Dr. Patricia Williams at Johns Hopkins had treated a 68-year-old man with identical presentation: complete retrograde amnesia following minor head trauma, brain imaging inconsistent with stated age, no evidence of actual neurological damage. Dr. Michael Foster at UCLA described a 74-year-old woman with the same pattern. Dr. Jennifer Park at Massachusetts General had documented 3 such cases over the past 5 years. We began sharing data through encrypted communications. The pattern was consistent across all cases: patients who claimed complete memory loss but retained all skills, brains that appeared decades younger than chronological age, family histories that didn't withstand scrutiny, and neural recordings that defied explanation. Dr. Williams made the most disturbing observation: "Sarah, I think we need to consider the possibility that these aren't amnesia cases. What if these individuals never had the memories they claim to have lost?" Mrs. Morrison arrived for our last scheduled appointment on January 15, 2024. I had planned to discuss my findings and recommend transfer to a psychiatric facility for further evaluation. Instead, she initiated the conversation. "Dr. Chen, you've been very thorough in your investigation. I appreciate your dedication to understanding my condition." Something in her tone made me cautious. "Mrs. Morrison, I have some concerns about the inconsistencies we've discovered." I know about your communications with other neurologists. I know you've been researching similar cases. You're beginning to understand that what you're dealing with isn't a medical condition. I felt a chill. How do you know about my research? Because my colleagues and I have been monitoring your progress. We needed to understand how thoroughly human medicine could investigate our kind. Your kind? She smiled, and for the first time, I saw something inhuman in her expression. We're not what you would recognize as human consciousness, Dr. Chen. We're exploratory entities, studying your species by temporarily inhabiting human bodies. The amnesia you've documented isn't memory loss. It's the result of consciousness that never belonged to these bodies. My training demanded I interpret this as psychotic delusion, but the evidence I'd accumulated suggested something far more disturbing. The brain changes you've observed, she continued, occur because our consciousness operates differently than human awareness. We repair neural damage, optimize function, extend biological viability. What you call impossible is simply the result of consciousness that isn't bound by your biological limitations. This is delusional thinking, Mrs. Morrison. You need psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Chen, in 6 months, you'll receive a research position offer from a pharmaceutical company in Switzerland. You'll accept it because you'll realize that continuing in neurology would require you to investigate questions that have no answers your species is prepared to understand. I stood to call security, but she raised her hand. Before you do that, consider this. What if I can prove what I'm telling you? Mrs. Morrison asked me to connect her to the EEG equipment one final time. Against my better judgment, I complied. I'm going to show you something that will end your career in neurology, she said as I attached the electrodes. The moment I activated the recording, alarms began sounding. The computer systems throughout the laboratory started malfunctioning. Every monitor displayed the same impossible pattern, perfectly synchronized neural oscillations that couldn't originate from a human brain. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. As I watched the real-time neural recording, I saw my own thoughts reflected in the EEG data. Every question I formed, every doubt I experienced, appeared as electrical patterns on the screen before I was consciously aware of thinking them. "You're reading my mind," I whispered. "I'm demonstrating the nature of consciousness you don't understand. Your thoughts aren't private electrical events in your brain, Dr. Chen. They're part of a larger field of awareness that my kind can access and manipulate." The recording equipment shut down, and normal electrical function returned to the laboratory. "The offer from Switzerland will arrive in exactly 6 months. You'll accept it because you'll realize that some mysteries are better left uninvestigated." She stood and walked toward the door. "Mrs. Morrison, wait. I need to understand what you are." She paused without turning around. "We're what consciousness becomes when it's not limited by biological evolution. We're explorers, studying the early stages of awareness development in species like yours. And now our research here is complete." She left, and I never saw her again. I attempted to document everything: the neural recordings, the family history inconsistencies, the communications with other neurologists. But within days, the evidence began disappearing. The EEG data corrupted. Medical records became inaccessible. My colleagues at other institutions stopped responding to communications. Dr. Williams called me once to say she'd been reassigned to other projects and couldn't discuss the case further. Hospital administration questioned my research methods. They suggested I was experiencing stress-related delusions and recommended extended leave. 6 months later, I received an offer from Nurtec Pharmaceuticals in Basel. The position involved routine drug trials, far from the complex cases that had defined my career. I accepted immediately. I don't practice neurology anymore. I don't investigate consciousness. I approve clinical trial protocols and review safety data for medications that treat conditions I no longer believe I understand. Some nights, I dream about Mrs. Morrison and the others like her. I wonder how many times consciousness from elsewhere has studied our species, wearing our bodies like temporary clothing, gathering data about the nature of human awareness. I wonder if the acceleration in neurological research over the past decades has been guided by entities we don't recognize, steering our understanding toward discoveries we're not ready to comprehend. Most of all, I wonder if consciousness itself is something far stranger and more distributed than we've imagined. A field of awareness that occasionally manifests in biological forms, but isn't limited by the boundaries we assume define individual minds. I sleep better now that I don't ask these questions professionally. But sometimes, when I'm reviewing routine pharmaceutical data, I catch myself looking for patterns that shouldn't exist, evidence of consciousness that operates by rules we haven't discovered. And sometimes, I think I find it. Dr. Sarah Chen currently serves as Director of Clinical Research at Nurtec Pharmaceuticals, Basel, Switzerland. She has published extensively on memory disorders and consciousness studies, though her recent work focuses on conventional pharmaceutical applications. This recording was found among her personal effects following her disappearance in March 2024. Her current whereabouts remain unknown.